Astrology is such a never-ending, I guess, topic because there is now so many different types of astrology we can learn. And yeah, whenever there's an interest point, I'll go on a deep dive. And I think continuing to learn really helps to solidify your understanding and your knowledge. And I think that's one of the things why I'm drawn to astrology is because it is so deep and there's endless possibilities to learn more and more.
Welcome to the She Who Dares podcast. I'm your host, Krystal Wilson, the founder of She Who Dares. I'm a specialized breakthrough and mindset coach, business mentor, online course creator, and your number one no BS hype woman. I'm here to remind you who the fuck you are and reignite your personal power through powerful and expanding conversations on all things business, mindset, and energetics, to help you break through to your next level of success in all areas of your life, business, and bank account. Each episode is designed to expand your mind, shift your identity, raise your frequency, as well as give you success strategies to help you step into your highest, most powerful, abundant, successful, and magnetic you. So, I dare you to join me each episode, and I double dare you to implement what you learn and go all in on you. All in on your life, your business, your success. Because if you do, like so many of my She Who Dares clients and students, you will become everything that you know deep down you can be. Ready? Let's friggin' do this. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the She Who Dares podcast. I'm so excited because today I'm interviewing my beautiful client and astrologer, Abby, and this is my first official interview on the She Who Dares podcast, and I couldn't think of a more perfect guest to have come on at this time of year is the beautiful Abby. Welcome, Abby.
Thanks so much for having me, Krystal. It's so great to be here.
Yeah, so much fun. So Abby is an astrologer, which is so cool. And, you know, some of you might already be following Abby. And if you're not, you absolutely need to start following her now because there is so much exciting stuff happening in 2025 astrologically. I'm seeing it on Abby's information. I'm seeing it all over Instagram. You might be seeing it too. But before we get into like the overview of the 2025 astrology, I want to give you guys a rundown on what we're going to do because this is actually a two-part interview. And it's really important that it's a two-part interview with Abby because Abby and I have actually worked together for a really long time. Abby's been a client of mine since I think 2019, 2020. So 4 to 5 years we've worked together on and off. And Abby first came into my world as a breakthrough client. And she had already started studying astrology and it really ignited her purpose and passion of the big, beautiful things that she wanted to do in the world. And we did some breakthrough work together to really help her to break through some of those fears of stepping into actually putting herself out there on the internet as an astrologer. We did that and she then launched her business, Stars by Abby, and has since 2020 been a business mentor client of mine. So what I think so fascinating, Abby, is learning about your journey of becoming an astrologer. Talk us through that because that's in itself is so fascinating.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I guess what really took me back to this interest of astrology was I read a book called The Artist's Way. And if anyone who has read it, it's a book that really ignites creativity and takes you back to your childhood. So after reading this book, one of the passions I got reignited with was astrology. I'm quite a minimalist, and I realized that a lot of the books that I had kept in my life were these astrology books that my mom had given to me when I was a kid. And I didn't have many other books, but I had all these astrology books. So I wanted to go back. I was like, this is really interesting. What is here? And so I started in a bit of a rabbit hole going into podcasts and listening and learning, and eventually took up a course and then more courses after that. I really took a deep dive into astrology and really realized it was something that I was pretty fascinated in. So it became this very deep hole of understanding and learning, and then starting to apply astrology in the real world.
I love that. So that's so fascinating because I didn't really know that about you. That's amazing. I love this because I just learned something new about you, that The Artist's Way, which I've actually heard about this book. I feel like last year a lot of people were reading it. So it was like popping up on my Instagram. And I think I reached out to you about it and you shared with me that you had done this process, The Artist's Way. But I love that this was always within you. Like if you reflected back on your life, astrology and an interest in the stars and the sky and what was happening in those energies, it was like it chose you long before you really chose it. So it was like a part of your destiny.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if it was more an interest of my mom or if she saw that I was really interested in it. But, I'm a Leo sun. And one thing about Leos is they're really interested in themselves. And so it was not a surprise that I loved reading all these books, mostly about Leo. I'd probably skip every other chapter and just read the Leo chapter. But I think what happens is when we grow up, and this is certainly explained in The Artist's Way, is our creativity gets kind of pushed down and pushed to the side, and things aren't cool anymore. And back then, astrology probably wasn't as cool as it maybe is now. And so it was just something that kind of drifted out of my life, but magically came back in when I read this book and went through the process of The Artist's Way. It's
I
amazing.
love that. You've just ignited a memory in me because I often say, like, I don't really know much, and I don't really know much about astrology. I actually learned so much about astrology having you in my life as my astrologer, as my client, and you're just a wealth of knowledge. But I remember, like, I think in my teens, there used to be this like big yearly astrology book. It was like a novel that you could get from like the news agency. And I
Yeah.
remember, like, every new year I would buy it just to read the Pisces section. I knew nothing about like moon and rising at that point. But do you remember those books? It was like the
Yeah.
yearly astrology books.
Absolutely. Like it's been around for so long and much, much, much longer than, just back to our childhood. But it is that fascinating, like intrigue. And it still has that really like people are fascinated about astrology and especially what their sign is and what does that mean for them. And so, it's this different rabbit hole that we can go down to really understand ourselves from a different light, I suppose.
Yeah, I love it. I think we must all have a little bit of Leo in us because people love self discovery.
Mm.
People want to pick up a book or read about astrology and learn and understand themselves deeper. And I think for a lot of people in like our generation, I think astrology was probably that first look into who am I? What are my traits? What are my characteristics? Astrology was that first door. Now, lots of different things have come out, but as what I've learned about astrology, you can correct me because I don't know the dates, but can you share? Like, I've heard some crazy numbers that like astrology has been around for, do you
Yeah,
know?
well, the evidence that we know is that astrology has been around since the 3rd century BC. So I don't know the calculations. It's a very long time.
Yeah,
Okay.
very fucking long time. I know what that stands for.
Back in the times of ancient Egypt, and it has carried all the way through. The history is pretty remarkable. There's been attempts to try and destroy it, but still, like there was these big burnings of the libraries that had all the astrological knowledge. So there was a lot of information that was lost when it comes to astrology. And even in the 17th century, when we discovered that the sun didn't revolve around us and we revolved around the sun, science then turned on astrology and kind of tried to out it. But it is still here. And we're sort of seeing, I think, a bit of a revival of astrology now because, and especially after 2020, I think, because people are looking for, they can sense that there is something else at play, a different energy and another energy that maybe not be so tangible that they can't quite see or touch, but they can feel it. And I think this is where astrology and a lot of these modalities come into play. So, yeah, one of the things that I love about astrology is that it has been around so long and it's still the test of time. And we're still learning and understanding and diving into astrology today.
Yeah.
I want to touch on something else that you said. And you said, I think Leo must be in everyone's chart. And I want to say it absolutely is. We have every single sign in our chart. So whilst you have your sun sign and your moon and rising, and every other planet sits in a sign, every single sign can be found in our chart somewhere. And so that's why we can look to perhaps where is Leo in our chart to really understand, what areas of our life that might be playing out in.
Yes. Okay. I love that. And my first awakening to that, like I grew up buying that book of the news agency in the New Year period to learn about Pisces because I just was a Pisces. But I remember being actually when I was doing my NLP prac, I shared a room with a girl who was into astrology and she was like, what's your birthday and what time are you born? And I've messaged my mum since that night, I don't know, 100 times asking her what time I was born. And this girl I was staying with then did my little chart, on the internet. And that's when somebody told me that there was our sun, our moon, and our rising, which before that, I didn't know what the hell that was. I just thought I was a Pisces. And what I learned about myself was that I was a Sagittarius moon and a Sagittarius rising, Pisces sun. And it was really interesting. It was like the missing piece for me because I'd often read about Pisces personalities. And even though I had some of those traits, I have this real like fire, you know what I mean, within me. And so I often would read Pisces. And I was like, I'm some of that, but I would not fully connect to it. But when I got the missing piece that I was a double Sagittarius, I felt like, everything now makes sense. It was my first time learning about there was like sun, moon, and rising. And if you're listening and you're like, what the fuck is that? Like, I don't know about that. Don't worry. Abby, do you want to give a quick explanation about what that is?
Yeah. Well, I think if we're coming to this as very like beginner level, people know their sign essentially. And what I want to tell you is that is essentially your sun sign, or it's the sign that the sun was in when you were born, when you took your first breath. So now if we think there's all the other planets as well, we have the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and so on. And they were all in a sign also. And the rising sign is not actually a planet, but it's the point on the easternmost horizon. So what was rising when you were born? And this is significant because it suggests that it's the energy that you are rising with. And if we think about it, if you put your brain on when it comes to space and planets and how everything moves, if you were born at sunrise, then your sun sign will be the same as your rising sign because the sun was rising, the sun would have been in the sign, and the rising sign is also the same sign at sunrise. So that can give you a little bit of an indication of what it all means. But this is how we get an astrological chart, and we can break it down and look at all the different personalities that we have within our own individual unique selves.
Love it. Love it. Okay, amazing. So talk to me about the study of astrology, because I was actually like, when we first started working together and you completed your studies, I think you did in the UK coming from memory, but it was quite extensive. And I feel like having been in your life for the last 4 to 5 years, even though you have got your like certificate, I'm an astrologer, you are also never not studying. Like you are always learning and like, as you're just like this constantly absorbing more wisdom and knowledge about astrology. But tell me about like what you did initially, like to be like, okay, now I have the certificate, I'm a fully fledged astrologer.
Yeah, well, I think initially, like, let's step that back. But the first thing I was doing was getting interested in all these podcasts. And I started listening and I found a few that I resonated with. But what I found really challenging was the lingo because I didn't understand what they were actually talking about. They were talking about sextiles and trines and houses and angles and planets, and it just didn't make sense at all. But I was determined and I was curious, and as you said, there was something innate within me, and so I just kept listening. And I think this is a part of learning that perhaps we maybe forget when we get older, is that things won't make sense in the beginning, but you have to apply yourself, and once you keep listening, that you start to understand. And so that's what I did. I just kept listening, I kept being curious, and I started to pick up the lingo and the language and understand what they were talking about. So I did enroll in my course and I worked with a mentor as I was going through the course. And so it was a 6 months deep immersion where I really studied the planets and really started to understand my chart, because that is essentially where we can start with astrology, because we have so much evidence, we have so much understanding, and we can really see how things will show up and play out, essentially, because it's our life, we've lived it, and we know ourselves, or hopefully we know ourselves, or we think we know ourselves. And so, yeah, I took that course, and after 6 months, it was just, I'd gained so much astrological knowledge that whenever I saw another course that might have been a 6-week or, a 3-week or something like that I was interested in, then I would sign up to learn more. But, I really think that I'm constantly learning. Astrology is such a never-ending, I guess, topic, because there is now so many different types of astrology we can learn. And yeah, whenever there's an interest point, I'll go on a deep dive. And I think continuing to learn really helps to solidify your understanding and your knowledge. And I think that's one of the things why I'm drawn to astrology, is because it is so deep and there's endless possibilities to learn more and more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a testament. You said something about I've stayed curious, like knowing you and having worked with you. That is such a top attribute of who you are, which I think why you and astrology are like, butter and toast, baby. Like you go really well together. Yeah. And you really are a student for life. And astrology gives you endless depth. Do you know what I mean? To keep learning about yourself. And now you've really moved in the last, couple of years, like as a fully fledged, do you know what I mean? Like not only have I done the courses and I'm continuously learning and study, but you are out there, lots of podcasts now as, an astrologer, doing readings. You've done, I don't know, like hundreds of readings of people now. Like it's just so amazing to like watch your transformation. And speaking to your transformation, because when we first started working together, you started as a breakthrough client. So a breakthrough client is really someone who's wanting to like break through. Do you know what I mean? Like to that next level, or maybe it's their past stuff, or maybe it's a new level they're wanting to get to. And so if we're just reflecting back, which might be a little bit difficult because it was a long time ago, but you did break through with me as you were studying your astrology. And I remember you saying to me, like, there was this fear around like going on the internet and like declaring just even posting, I'm just going to use declaring for dramatic effect, but declaring like I'm an astrologer, like this is what I do. Like I do readings and this is what I'm passionate about. There was this real, like almost like a shedding of an identity that you had thought you had to be, and really stepping into the identity of like, this is my purpose, this is my destiny, this is my passion. So do you feel that like in the breakthrough work that helped you to like step into that identity, even though it was scary, like to be like, I'm a fucking astrologer. I knew what I have to say.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I still feel like I'm breaking through always when I'm working with you, Krystal. But I definitely think that doing that work and really deep diving into understanding what your own core beliefs and limiting beliefs are can help you see why maybe you are not making progress or not stepping into the areas that you really want to. And I see this a lot with other people now that I feel like I have stepped in and owned this title and this work that I'm doing. And I see it with, I recently chatted with a Reiki therapist. I've done all the courses and I've done all this and that. And I was like, well, are you doing it? She's like, no. And again, her fear was that she was worried about how she was going to be seen. So I think what I learned in that process is that I guess the fear that we are worried about is what the people in our lives, the people that we already know, are going to think about us maybe going off on a path that is a little bit unknown. And especially if something is new, it's a little bit out there and it might not be something that everyone believes in. That's, I think, when we experience this fear, because, maybe we're not going to be validated by the peers around us or the people in our lives. But what I have found is that you build up a community of people that are actually interested in the work that you're doing. So when I started posting and talking about astrology, I was attracting the people into my life that are interested in that. And so then that in turn gave me more support and encouragement to continue talking about it, because they loved what I was talking about and they were really interested. And, the other people, if there were any, they probably weren't even watching my posts or stories or whatever it was that I was talking about it, because it's not an interest for them. So I think, that really gave me like support and encouragement around me to just continue to step in even more and deeper. And that's what I keep doing and continue to do.
Yeah. And it's not about like something I always say, we're not removing the fear. Fear is a natural, normal part of life. It's like, how well can you get at moving with the fear? Like, okay, I feel the fear about this post, or I feel the fear about people coming after me because I love astrology and I want to start posting about it more, and I want to be an astrologer and I want to build a business. And can you feel the fear of that and let your purpose and passion be the thing that drives you versus your fear stopping you? And I think like you're a testament to that work, because I remember it wasn't like I'm just going to start posting about it. Of course, there was fear about it. And you now are like fully out there, out there doing it. It's just amazing.
Yeah, and I think when we have that fear, it's probably because something is really important to us. So when we can, push through that upper limit and step through, we can see like bigger advancements and greater accomplishments, I suppose. And yeah, reflecting back, I definitely can see that has been a journey, and I can see how far I've come, which has been amazing.
Yeah, so good. Okay, so you've been a client of mine since like, let's say, I think 2019, like we don't have the exact dates, but I think it's around 2019. But then in 2023, I actually became a client of yours while you were also a client of mine, which I absolutely loved. Let me just give you some context. I had had a birth chart reading done, I reckon in the last 10 years, twice by two other people. I had nothing done by Abby. This was years ago. And to be honest with you, I feel like once I had my birth chart done, I didn't really know what I could do with astrology past reading my horoscopes and referring back to the birth chart. And so what I learned working with you is that there is so much that we can do with astrology. And your birth chart is like stepping stone one of a huge journey you can take with astrology. And so in 2023, I became a client of Abby's, and I booked in a forecast reading, which was so fascinating to me, especially someone in business who's planning and excited about, the next 3 months or the next year. Even like right now, I love New Year energy. I love Christmas. And then I'm like, once Christmas is over, I'm like, get my Christmas tree away from me. Let's all about New Year energy, right? And so I purchased I think it was a 3-month forecast reading from you, which really blew me away because I never looked at astrology in terms of my future. I feel like the birth chart gives you like the foundations of like past, and it does give you future, but I feel like it's more backward facing. I don't know why I feel like that. Whereas like I never thought I could get an astrology reading about like, let's look at the next 3 months and let's look at it specifically for your business, or let's look at it specifically for your health or your money or your relationships. And so that to me was really fascinating. And I loved the 3-month forecast reading that we did. We focused it from memory around my business. It must have been the beginning of 2023 because I was just in the stages of like, okay, I'm going to get back into IVF. So talk to me about that, because I feel like a lot of people, they have their birth chart reading and then they don't know that there's even like what they would do past that. So what do you do with your clients?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'll say like if astrology is something that intrigues you and you've had a birth chart reading, go and have a birth chart reading with someone else that you resonate, because I guarantee you they're probably going to say a lot of things that are similar to what you already know, but they're going to give you some different things, a different perspective, right? I've had multiple astrology readings from different astrologers, and I always gain a little bit more insight. And the reason is because we interpret things in different ways. So, for example, I'll just break that down a little bit. If we're talking about the symbol of fire, right? I can interpret fire as hot, passionate, magnetic, intuitive, but I'm never going to interpret fire as cold, right? So astrology is a language of symbols, and it's just interpreted in different ways. And so go and have a birth chart reading by a different astrologer. They'll probably bring a different angle, a different way, and someone you resonate with, because I think that is very important as well. So when we look at a birth chart is simply a snapshot of the sky when you took your first breath. It's a moment in time, and it's a fixed chart. When we're looking at forecasting, what we do is we overlay the chart of today or tomorrow or 10 years in the future or 10 years in the past. And this is how we can see how the current sky energies or tomorrow's energy is interacting with your birth chart, where there might be abundance and good fortune, where there might be lessons to learn, and how that is changing and what cycle that is going to move through. So as you said, when we come up to this time of the year, we can look at astrology for 2025 and see what is happening. So I can look at where are these energies moving through in your chart specifically to give you an understanding of what might be the major themes and events and things that are going to be happening, what might be in focus this year or this coming year for you.
I love it. Okay, so could I come to you as like a business owner and be like, Abby, I have big goals and visions for 2025, and I want to do like, a 3-month reading of the first 3 months or the whole of 2025 on like great dates, like positive, abundant dates, and give you like the information about what they want to do. And then you can like cross-check it and then give them kind of the missing pieces of the guidance based on their astrological chart for 2025.
Yeah, 100%. So whilst we can look at different times, we can also look at different areas. You mentioned about the business side of things, and we talked about business and fertility when we did your forecast reading. And, you could focus on just one area of your chart, like if it was relationships or if it was your home and family or your career, whatever it is that you're interested in, you could focus on that area in a reading and really gain an understanding. There's lots of different ways to use astrology, and there's ancient techniques that we can use to understand what things are being lit up, what things are being brought into focus. And so that's why you could do a whole reading on just one small snapshot of your chart, because ultimately within the chart, you can look at pretty much, or I'll say anything really that is happening in your life, and you can pinpoint it to a certain point in the chart. And so, yeah, that's what we can do when we look at, the next 3 months or the next year or whatever it is that you're wanting to learn about.
I love it. I feel like when I'm talking about astrology, and I've probably done this to you many times, I'm like, oh, there's that quote. And I can never like fully master the quote. But I've seen it before. And it's a thing that as a business owner, it's excited me most about astrology. Like I feel like before having a business, I was really loved learning about myself with astrology. Now that I have a business, I'm like, oh, this is so exciting. And I remember I read a quote that said that billionaires, like stock market billionaires, like people, they use astrology to make their moves and what dates, like when to make the moves. Now, if you know the quote off by heart, I've just killed it, like murdered it. So it's okay, but you get the gist of what I'm saying. But have you heard that as well?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I don't actually know the quote.
It's a meme. It's probably a meme. But I'm just fascinated by that.
Well, actually, back in the day, astrology was only used by kings and queens and royals. Like no one had access to it. So it was actually so high up on a pedestal that it was only the really wealthy people that could actually afford to have astrologers in their life, and they would use it to, pick the best times to go into battle or war or whatever it was. And so it really was reserved for that higher upper class. And so, yes, what you're saying is absolutely correct. It is used by people wanting to make moves and learning to understand the timing and how things, because ultimately the definition of astrology is the correlation of the movements of the planets and how they essentially reflect and correlate with the events that happen on Earth. That's all it is. And astrologers simply interpret that. So, that's why there can be so many different interpretations, because everyone comes from a different learning, a different understanding, and a different personal background. So
I love it. It's so fascinating. Okay, so that's the last time I had a reading by you, was by 2023, and you gave me a little snapshot.
yes.
And I think you have something prepared for me today. Is this correct?
Yeah, so I've been spending a lot of time, probably like at least 6 months, looking into the astrology of 2025. And if you follow me, I've been talking about it for a long time now. I've just launched my 2025 astrology reports and readings. And so I thought it would be fun to have a bit of a look into where the energy is playing out in your chart. So, yeah.
My God, Abby, I love it. Yes, 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 yes. I love it. I'm like, do I need a notepad? I'm like, no, just absorb it. You can re-listen later and take notes. I'm ready to receive. I'm so excited because I feel like we spoke about this because Abby also held a masterclass in December. It was the 2025 astrology. And I said to her, let's do it twice, right? Let's do it in December. Let's do it in January, because when we were putting together her masterclass, I was like, I was so in 2024 that I couldn't even think about it. Like I just needed to get to the end of this year. And it's so interesting how I think it was like before I went away, it's like 10 days ago, there's been such a huge shift in my energy where now I'm like, New Year energy's here. Like, what do I want? What do I want to become? What do I want to create? So I'm like feeling that energy now. And we're going to give you guys some details on the next time you can catch that masterclass on part 2. But I'm so excited. Abby, give it to me. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so there is a lot that has been going on. And I might even just start with a bit of a snapshot on, perhaps some energies from this year that have been happening or playing out. And for you, we've all probably heard, or if we haven't, that Pluto has moved into Aquarius. Now, Pluto is a planet that shifts signs every 15 to 20 years. And before I go into this, what I always say to my clients is, I want you to take what resonates and leave the rest, because this is my interpretation. I always want people to stand in their power and own their own understanding and knowing. And so if something that I say doesn't resonate for you, it's just not a message for you, or it's not the interpretation that's right for you. So first we have to know that. We have to trust our intuition and know that's right for us. So I always like to say that before we get started. But Pluto having moved out of Capricorn and into Aquarius for you, Krystal, is Pluto has been moving through this area in Capricorn, which is now complete, which has really transformed and up-leveled your self-worth, your personal values that you hold for yourself, and probably your finances and money over the last 15 years. And so correct me if I'm wrong, but over that time frame, you have gone through a massive transformation, a massive up-leveling, and now that chapter is complete. And when we also look at the way that you carry yourself and relate to yourself and your self-worth, there's been some massive changes and some massive upheavals and a lot of digging under the soil and bringing up things to the surface to shift and move through. And that is now complete, essentially. So what you're stepping into now is, over this next sort of 20-year time frame, is that energy is coming in to transform and rediscover things that are familiar to you, things in your local area. I know you've just moved as well, so that's really interesting. So it's about really deep diving into the community that you have around you, the things that are close to you, and also communicating. So the way that you get your message out into the world. These are areas that over the next 20 years, it's going to have a subtle undertone. And, when we pop out in 2044, you'll look back and see that the journey that you've come on there. So that is the first thing that I want to say that really relates to Pluto in Aquarius. Is that landing for you?
Oh, 100%. And I feel it's so interesting, even if that journey is coming to an end, it's so interesting because I feel like I have arrived in this really grounded place within myself. And I also turned 40 last year. So yeah, that resonates. And then when you said about the next phase being about community communication, like all of my goals, especially my business. I launched this podcast in November, you know what I mean? Like I really wanted to get back out there and really, start speaking on things I want to speak about. And one of my intentions for 2025 is I've done a podcast on social media. I really want to be doing a lot of face to camera speaking, sharing my work in a way that scares me a little bit that I haven't done before, putting myself out there even more. So that's so interesting. I think that's both the lines.
Yeah, I feel like astrology can be so powerful when we look back, because we can actually see what has happened in a cycle. Whereas when we're looking forward, yes, we can say this is our intentions, but we don't actually know what is going to play out. So interesting that everything started with the podcast in November, because that's when Pluto made its shift into Aquarius. So it's all aligned. It's all happening for you. So as we head into 2025, there's going to be a bit of a slower start, essentially. We have a lot of planets in retrograde, and the planets that are in retrograde are Mars, Jupiter, and Uranus. And Mars is a planet that doesn't retrograde very often. And so for you, this is in the areas of your life that is about your personal belief systems. So when a planet is in retrograde, we're kind of reviewing, we're reflecting, we're going within to look at certain areas of our lives. And for you, this could be around your belief systems, around like the learning that you're doing or the teaching that you're doing. But also there is an element of transformation that is upcoming that you'll be kind of really taking a deep dive into to understand and really break through any fears that are holding you back and stepping, and it might be challenging and hard and take you on a real deep dive into the mysteries and, the fears that lie underneath that we can't really see on the surface. But then what is going to happen is this ultimately, as we move through the year and we get to the midpoint of the year, that then is going to flip into being this really abundant catalyst for you where you'll attract opportunities, good fortune, and really being able to find growth and expansion through the things that you have learnt by reflecting on those areas in your chart, if that makes sense.
Makes total sense. And what's so interesting about what you just said is that I said to Bruce, I'm going to spend the next 90 days, like I'm going to pick a day, I'm going to do this thing every day in my business. I'm going to put myself out there in a way that I haven't done before, that has been like, you know what I mean? Like a block and a barrier and a fear. And I'm just going to fucking do it. And then I said to him, and then you watch the second half of 2025, how like abundant, prosperous it will be, because I haven't like really stepped into the level of leadership that I know that I can step into because I've had fears and beliefs pull me back. So that's so interesting. That like totally aligns to like my own intuition guiding me.
And it's really interesting that you were talking with Bruce about this, because there is an element that does involve your significant other and what they support you in and bring to the table. So I love hearing that.
Yeah.
The other thing that is happening is there's a massive shift with Saturn and Neptune. The outer planets, they're moving from Pisces into Aries. So Saturn is the planet of constriction. And whilst I think Saturn as a planet gets a little bit of a bad rap because we always think it's the things that makes it hard, it maybe removes things from our lives because it's constricting. If you think of Saturn itself, it has the rings around it. It's like the boundaries. And so it represents things like boundaries and discipline. And it's almost like the strict grandparent, I suppose. But actually, like, if you think back to the times that you have actually accomplished things that have been incredible, they take hard work. And when things are hard, we have a bit more of a relationship of accomplishment, because when things come easy, they just kind of flow. We don't necessarily learn things from them. But when things are hard, we learn the lessons and we can up level a little bit. And so that's what Saturn is all about. And Neptune is the planet of dreams, spirituality. It is connected to the higher realms, essentially. It's also connected to things being unclear, and addictions as well is another thing that Neptune represents. Now, these two planets have kind of been moving together through Pisces, which would be having a lot of impact on you because they're going over some of your personal planets at some point in the last 3 years, okay? Along with, all the other planets that move through Pisces. And so, this is why there's probably been challenges and hardships through the last, 3 years with those planets moving through there. Now, these planets are going to shift out of Pisces and into Aries. So where that has probably been hard in your life is in the area of your home and family and sort of living situation. I know that to be true because you've been through moves and challenges, and that is ending essentially, because when Saturn and Neptune, they're going to be moving into a different area of your chart, which is going to be bringing a bunch of new lessons and new understandings and new beginnings, because they're moving into Aries, which is the first sign of the zodiac, and it's activating different areas of your life. So it's going to be activating the area of your life that is all about good fortune. It's about the things that you love. It's about children, dating. I know you're probably not going to be dating, but you might be up leveling your dating life with Bruce. Fertility is another area. And so this is all being activated by this shift. And whilst it might not be crossing over your personal planets, it might not have that intense impact as what things have been having in the last 3 years. It's just a new area that you're going to be able to be working on and understanding and transforming essentially, and connecting in with, Saturn suggesting that you might have to put more boundaries, more discipline in place so that you can have, the things that you love in your life.
Abby, shut the front door. Like everything you just said to me, holy moly, what has worked for me and how I've operated in my business. I just know energetically, emotionally, I cannot operate like that anymore. And so I'm like boundaries. And when I speak about boundaries, I think what's really important, like it's me, like it's no one else. Like I am the problem. It's like, hi, my name's Krystal Wilson, and I have a problem with honoring my boundaries. Like, so boundaries is a huge theme for me. And then discipline, a huge theme. Like, oh my God, like you're just speaking my language. Even when you speak about the last 3 years, like 2022 knocked me to the freaking ground. Like it was one of my toughest years ever, mentally, emotionally, family, financially, business, like everything felt like it crumbled to the ground. And I had to like stand up and rebuild myself. And when I reflect like now, because it's the end of the year, I'm like, wow, like I'm okay. Like I'm standing back up again. I built my self-belief again, even though I got knocked to the ground. So I really feel that 3-year thing coming to an end. Like I feel so like proud of everything. I mean, it's not been a fun time, but we got through it. And then when you talk about like this next cycle, it's so aligned, like so aligned. Because also in business, like for those of you who follow me and listen to the podcast, I've been going through a lot of IVF, especially the last end of this year. I realized that I can't operate as a childless woman running a business, and I can run it at a certain way. There's no way that I can run that business that way, pregnant with a newborn. So things I feel like need to shift in this first kind of like half of 2025 with boundaries and discipline so that I can hold both in a grounded energy. So aligned, love it. And this is why I love getting these forecast readings. And you just gave me like, I mean, it was like 10 minutes, like amazing.
Yeah, I mean, whenever anything moves into Aries, it brings about these new beginnings. And so I think that's why you might be feeling this way. You're sensing that this shift, and that what you're talking about is Saturn shifting in. You're going to have a new look at your boundaries for yourself and how you can up level and take yourself to that next level of your life.
Yeah. I'll give you a prime example. I'm going to share something that happened with Abby and I on the 26th. This is an example of the boundaries, right? My clients can message me. There's not a boundary. Anyone can message me anytime. The problem is how I react and respond to that. That's the problem. But Abby messaged me about this podcast interview, and I was in the middle of like Bruce's parents had just tested positive for COVID. They're high risk. They've driven 2 hours from Toowoomba. I was manic, and this is a me problem. So I see Abby's messaged me, and instead of being like, Krystal, you don't have the capacity right now to engage in a grounded energy in like this conversation with Abby, what do? I open the message and then I respond to Abby in an energy I don't want to respond to her, which is like, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling stressed, like, can you do other dates? Like, like this blur energy, which is not who I am at my core. And that interaction we had just the other morning was another like universal sign, Krystal, it's you. Do you know what I mean? Like you need to like slow down. You don't have to respond to everything instantly. And this is the discipline, the boundaries that I'm talking about. Because then I messaged Abby a few hours later. I was like, I've taken an exhale. This is what happened when I was messaging, and I shouldn't have responded to you straight away. I should have taken a minute before I reacted. And so even in that was a great lesson for me. You know what I mean? The other morning, I was like, this is the boundaries and discipline I've been talking about.
I have this thing as well, because sometimes I'm the same, because it's like, oh, I see a message, I want to respond to it, because then it might get lost in my messages. But then I just turn the message back onto unread, so I know what it is, and then I have time to think about it. And when I feel like it's time to respond, then, then I can go back and respond to the message.
I've been playing in that energy a little bit this year, and I'm really feeling like I've never in my 10 years in business felt that. I've been able to run at that pace, but the pace has changed. Do you know what I mean? I think coming into like IVF and the next part of my life, motherhood, I'm like, this way is no longer working. Yeah. And so when you speak about those boundaries and discipline, I just gave that example because it was a great learning moment that I had with myself, which involved Abby. And now she's giving me all this great astrology information as well. Abby, thank you so much for that little snapshot. I just got so much out of that. And what that makes me want to do is, okay, so I want more. So what is the more? Because the listener is probably thinking that's so cool. Like, I would love to learn that stuff about my, can you please tell the listeners like what their next step is?
Yeah, well, there's a few things. If you're interested in getting a reading, you can come and just have your birth chart read. I recommend starting here if you haven't had any sort of reading before, is to get your birth chart read, because I also sort of describe a little bit about astrology and what it means and how it applies. So you're sort of learning as well. You can also book in for a forecast reading if you're interested in finding out what the next 3 months might have in store. Or you could also get one of my 2025 astrology reports and readings. So you can buy a report which gives you a bit of an overview of 2025 and how it applies to you personally. And I list a whole bunch of dates in there that you can map out in your calendar, in your diary. And yeah, it's incredible. And then if you're looking for something a little bit more, the other offer that I have is the report with a reading. So you get the report and then we can really dive deeper. We go for 90 minutes, which I don't really do 90-minute readings anywhere else. So it means we can cover off on a few topics of what you're really wanting to know and learn about for 2025 and how you can best use the astrological energy in your life.
And just to give you guys an idea, that's kind of like what we've just done. Do you know what I mean? Like Abby's kind of like looked at my chart. She's got the forecast of 2025. And then we were able to like engage, and I can ask questions and I can be like, oh my God, that like fully aligned. Like, this is what I'm thinking. And then we can kind of like feed off of each other. So that's the thing, because right now it's 2025 coming like in a couple of days. Like, it's here, you know what I mean? Like, it's happening. Like, we can't hold it back anymore. It's happening. And some of you I know are like, fuck 2024, I'm ready for 2025. Now is the time to get that, your full overview of the year. And if you really want to be able to like ask Abby questions and get intricate details and focus on specific areas of your life personalized to you, have that back and forth and just like have her for 90 minutes, like just like you and her asking her questions about your 2025. Like, you want that package. That's the one.
I think it's so valuable, to have that back and forth, because, you know, if I do sort of say something and it doesn't resonate for you, then I can give you another interpretation that might land a little bit better.
Or even the asking of the questions, right?
Absolutely.
Like, because the thing is, like, when you're doing that 90-minute reading, like, you could say something to me and then I'm like, oh, that's so interesting. Like, this is like what's been coming up for me. And then that might be the missing piece. Do you know what I mean? Where you can slightly see a different interpretation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Astrology works best when you have that back and forth dialogue, because you really get an understanding of where someone is at in their life and what they're working on.
Totally. And I've had, like, when we did I got an audio, the 3-month course, I got an audio, but then I was able to ask Abby questions, you know what I mean? Because we're working together and things like that. So I kind of had that option. And every time I've had my birth chart, which is like twice over the last maybe 15 years, you kind of get your birth chart and it's like, wow, I've just received so much powerful information. Like, I've learned so much about myself. And then it's like, now what? Like, I have questions. You're like, who do I go to? And I feel like the level of mentorship and guidance that you offer in the 90-minute session is like so beautifully accompanied with the report. So if you're like ready for 2025, you're so over 2024, you're ready for 2025, that's the thing you need. We're going to put all of this in the show notes for you. Now, this is a 2-part series. So we're going to actually put everything about this episode in the show notes for you guys. You want to follow Abby. And in part 2, Abby is going to do a deep dive into the overview for like the world, you know what I mean, for 2025 astrology energy, which I'm so excited for. So if you've loved this episode, follow Abby, book in your 2025 astrology reading and report with her, and then we'll see you for part 2. Thanks, Abby.
Amazing. Thanks, Krystal.
Thank you so much for joining me for today's episode. If you loved this episode, be sure to share that with me by leaving me a review, and head over to the She Who Dares official Instagram account at She Who Dares Official, hit follow, slide into my DMs, and share with me the impact this episode has had on you. And before you go, I'm going to leave you with this. The universe is responding to you. It is following your lead. You are the one who has to move first And when you do, the whole universe will move with you, because it's I lead, the universe follows. When I move, the universe moves with me. That is our official She Who Dares mantra. I want you to write it down, put it on a mirror, and I want you to remind yourself of it every day. When I lead, the universe follows. When I move, the universe moves with me. When you follow this She Who Dares mantra, you are going to unlock the magic of the universe, and you are stepping into your most powerful self. I can't wait to see you for the next episode. Thanks for being here.